So I will also mention briefly, if you're finding that EFT doesn't work, there's one or two other ideas I have for you that you might find help. So if you're using EFT for yourself, and you always use it in the same room or the same environment, for example, and there happens to be a lot of electronics in that environment, you've got the computer and you've got the TV and you've got lights on, some people find that EFT, or emotional freedom technique, works better for them in a natural environment. So change your environment if EFT isn't working. You've tried remainder rounds, you've tried different aspects, and if it's still not working, put yourself in a natural environment as best as you can, so that you can connect your energy system with the energy system of nature, because we're really part of nature, right? So sometimes to help ourselves heal, we need to move back in that direction. So again, moving into a natural environment, or taking out other chemicals that are in your environment is the other thing I might suggest. So sometimes it's something as simple as laundry soap, or chemicals that we're using when we're bathing, that kind of thing, deodorants. Sometimes they cause a chemical reaction with the body that can sometimes inhibit the process of EFT. So these are called energy toxins. Sometimes it's even lead and other chemicals, other minerals that are in excess in our body that can inhibit the process. But when in doubt, get back to nature, as close to nature as you can. The other thing that a lot of my clients want to know, or sometimes ask, although it's a bit more technical and not required in order to benefit from EFT, some people like to know about the specific points. What meridian line is that? And is that meridian line connected to specific emotions? And the answer is yes. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So we'll start at the sore spot and or the collarbone point. And that point is actually the kidney meridian. So most people find that this sore spot is obviously most beneficial for those who are experiencing psychological reversal and to help move past that. So again, it's the kidney meridian when you're tapping the collarbone point, or when you're pressing on the sore spot. If you're going to move to the beginning part of the eyebrow, this is your bladder meridian, right here on both sides, of course. And this particular point is actually really helpful for those who have experienced trauma, or if there's a lot of hurt and a lot of sadness. So for clients who you might find, if you watch yourself or watch a client specifically enough, you might find that they actually shift and transition here while they're tapping this particular point if they're experiencing trauma, hurt, or sadness. So as you get to know these points a little bit better, there can be benefits, although because we know the full EFT protocol, it's not necessary to memorize all of these different points and what they're really about. The outside of the eye is the next point, and it's the gallbladder meridian. Now for those who have experienced resentment or have issues of anger, if you're tuned into an issue that's resentment or anger, this is a really good point to tap. There's others, of course, because they're all correlated and correspond with one another. But the gallbladder meridian is really specific and can assist with anger and resentment. Now under the eyes would be next, and this is your stomach meridian. So sometimes there's other issues that are held in the stomach. In Chinese medicine, it's a little different. Fear and anxiety is often held, or when someone's anxious, where do they feel that? Well, they have butterflies in their stomach, right? And that's because it's the stomach meridian, and tapping this specific point can really help if there's fear and or anxiety. You kind of see the connection. You know, I feel nervous. Well, where do you feel nervous? Well, I feel it in my belly, or I feel it in my stomach. Okay, good. Spend a little bit longer tapping the point under the eye. Okay? When you're tapping under the nose, this is governing meridian. The governing meridian in Chinese medicine, it's one of the main meridians. So sometimes you can have yourself tap a little longer on that point, the governing meridian. And it's mostly connected to shame and powerlessness. Shame and powerless. So if there's an issue in your life that you're working on, you feel very shameful or embarrassed, or you felt powerless in a situation, spend a little longer under the nose. The next point, the chin point, is the central meridian. Again, the central meridian is a really specific and main meridian channel in Chinese medicine. And it's really good for confusion and uncertainty about things. So if you have a hard time deciding, or you feel confused about things a lot, this is a really good point to spend a little longer on. And you might find it what I call your point. Like, you know, it's your favorite point, or you often find that you shift and transition at that point. So we're just going to I think it helps to know a little bit more about each of them specifically. So from here, we move under the arm, 4 inches underneath the armpit and that side rib cage. And under the arm, this is your spleen meridian. Spleen meridian. So if you're feeling guilt, worry, or you keep obsessing about things, because sometimes we get in that pattern of obsessive thoughts and we can't stop those obsessive thoughts. Or if there's guilty feelings, I feel so guilty about what I did, see if you can stay a little longer underneath the arm. Okay. Now the rib points, the liver meridian, which we identified before, is directly at the top part of the rib cage, right below the nipple, although it's an optional point, we'll call it that. This is, again, really good for anger and primitive emotions. So if you're stuck or your client's stuck, spend a little longer there if there's anger or primitive emotions that we need to address. The karate chop point we'll do next, and we'll go back to the finger points. We won't miss those. This one's a small intestine meridian. Small intestine meridian. And of course, both hands either side. And it's, again, really good for feeling stuck or for psychological reversal. And that's why we use the karate chop point or the sore spot when we're saying our affirmation to begin with. Going back to some of the fingers, because we don't want to miss those, the side of the thumb is the lung meridian, okay, your lungs. And it's really good for negative thinking. You know, if you can't, sometimes we become aware of those thoughts and we can catch ourselves in the negative thinking pattern. So the side of the thumb is really good to help alleviate that pattern. The index finger is the large intestine meridian. So spend a little longer on this point if you have difficulty forgiving yourself or letting go of past hurts. Okay? So if you have difficulty forgiving yourself for something that you've done, maybe it's a feeling of regret, or if you have trouble letting go of past hurts, then spend a little longer on that index finger. The middle finger is a circulation meridian, the circulation or the sex meridian. And you can spend a little longer on this point if there's anger or sexuality issues. So if there is sexual abuse or if there's other issues of anger, spend a little longer on that point. Okay. The pinky finger is the heart meridian. Again, this one's a little associated with anger, but also overachievement or overexcitement about things. So spend a little longer there if that's what you're working on. The gamut point, the back of the hand, that's a really important point. It's called the triple warmer meridian. The triple warmer meridian in Chinese medicine is, again, a very powerful meridian. And you can spend a little longer on this point, on either hand, of course, if there's a obsessing or worrying about things. Sometimes that really helps to stay a little longer on that point for worrying or obsessing, because we all tend to worry, of course, right? Top of the head, like we talked about, is one of the additional points, is governing vessel 20. Governing vessel 20 in Chinese meridian, or in Chinese medicine. And it's good for anchoring or allowing in a different perspective, a new perspective that we'd like to shift to, right? That's why we sometimes add that positive affirmation at the top of the head. One other point that we haven't quite touched on yet, and I will add in it now, is called the thymus point. And the thymus point is the seat of the immune system. That's right here in the middle. Right here in the middle, below that U-shaped collarbone. And you can sometimes just tap there, and you can tap there daily for a little bit, just for good health and to stimulate the immune system if you're not feeling well and you want to anchor in something healthy for the body. And again, it's also good, just like the top of the head, it's good for a positive affirmation at the end of a round. You could, if you're not comfortable with top of the head, you can do that here at the thymus point instead. Something else that I really love about Chinese medicine, and what's really important to understand, that their way of approaching health and approaching the physical body is a little different. So daily tapping to keep the energy flowing in the body can keep all the organs and the entire system of the body flowing just as it should and keep the body in good health. And practicing things like daily yoga or meditation or Tai Chi or Qigong, as they often do in China, is to keep the body healthy. Their system is a little different. If you have a Chinese doctor, the doctor's job is to help you stay healthy and keep you healthy. And if you ever got sick, then you better get another doctor or a different doctor, because the doctor's not doing a very good job, which is a little different. In fact, I would say it's the complete opposite of how some other European countries or North American countries perceive the medical approach. Usually what's perceived as in North America or in European countries is if we get sick, we go to a doctor to help us get better. Right? We get sick, we're not feeling well, we go to the doctor, they give us a prescription, and that'll take away the problem. In Chinese medicine, it's a very different perspective. We have to understand that the practice of tapping and the practice of all these other energy meridian balancing systems, whether it's Tai Chi or Qigong or any other meridian tapping that's out there, the practice is to keep the body healthy, to maintain health, to restore health on a consistent basis, so that you don't ever have to go to a doctor like you would in North America or in other European countries. So practice tapping on a daily basis. Even if you're not tapping on a past issue or a past trauma, you can just tap and say, even though I'm worried that today is not going to turn out just like I thought it would, or just like I'm hoping it will, I'm going to love and accept myself anyway and let today be as it may. Right? This worry that today is not going to turn out like I'm hoping it will. What if today doesn't turn out like I hope it will? This worry about today. I'm going to let that worry go and allow myself to enjoy today and whatever it brings. I'm going to allow myself to enjoy today and whatever it brings. Okay. So remember, stay focused on specific issues, but feel free to do daily tapping for general good health as well. And now for some more advanced techniques when applying EFT or emotional freedom technique. So instead of just jumping around randomly trying to resolve issues, it's sometimes better to take very specific approaches, and there's a couple of different ways to do that. And I'm going to tell you what those are. The first technique that you can use is something called the story approach, or the story technique, where you can do either one of two things. If it's for yourself, you can go through the story or the memory a little bit at a time. And if you're going to work with a client, then you can have them tell the story, or at least go through it in their mind a little bit at a time. Now, before you even begin tapping, it's important to sometimes name the story. So maybe the name of the story is the horrible car accident story. Maybe the name of the story is that horrible fight I had with my mom. Maybe the name of the story is what happened to me when I was little, if it was a very specific event. So name the story either for yourself or have your client do it, and then tap until, when you say the name of the story out loud, continue to tap until it's a 0 for you. Because sometimes even just naming the story and giving it some validity can bring up an emotional charge for us. So start with that. Okay, so if I say the name of the story, oh, that's like an 8. And then tap until just saying the name of the story out loud is a 0. And then begin the memory, which sometimes is no more than 30 seconds or a minute long. In all actuality, it seems much longer. But start with the beginning of the story. And as soon as you feel an emotion arise, as soon as you feel or see your client, if you're very observant of body language, you'll see your client and their emotion arise. Stop and tap. And wait till it gets to a 0. Do as many remaining rounds as you need to until you're at a 0. Good. Now start the story again over from the beginning and make sure that you feel calm, or that your client feels calm. And then as soon as you feel another spike, as soon as you feel or see another spike, either for yourself or for your client, if you're doing it for yourself, you'll feel like, oh, it was fine. And then this happened. Oh, tap on that until that becomes a 0. Continue to tell the story again. Tell the title from the beginning. Move towards the middle of the story. If something else comes up, then tap again on what else comes up. Let's use a car accident to be a bit more specific as an example. It's call it the car accident story. Okay, tap until the car accident story is a 0. And then you can maybe have your client identify, well, I was driving, it was a nice sunny day, everything was fine. And then I turned the corner. Good. This feeling I had when I turned the corner, this feeling I had when I turned the corner, this feeling I had. Have your client tap on this feeling I had when I turned the corner. Okay, good. Now go back to the beginning of the story. It was a bright sunny day, and everything's fine, and then I turned the corner, and that's when it happened. It was so awful. Okay, that's obviously another spike. Then we would tap on, even though it was so awful, I'm going to love and accept myself regardless of what happened. Repeat the setup statement 2 more times. It was so awful, it was so awful, it was so awful, it was so awful. Do the gamut point procedure if you need to, and then until that point gets to, until there's 0 again. and then continue with the story. But it was awful. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the little girl playing with a ball. And as soon as that ball started rolling across the road, I saw her come across the street. And it was too late to stop. And the guilty feeling comes up. Okay. Then we would tap on the guilty feeling. This guilty feeling, I was going to stop, but I couldn't. This guilty feeling, I was going to stop, but I couldn't. I didn't have time. And then you'd probably tap on regret, or you'd probably tap on remorse, or you'd probably tap on angry at myself, or whatever it is that arises, either for you or for the client. And then you'd continue with the story. I had to get out of the car and help her. The screams, I could hear the screams. Sometimes it's an auditory memory. Okay, even though those screams were the most horrible sound I've ever heard, the screams, I felt so bad, I had to hear that little girl scream if you hit her with the car, for example. I worked with a client, this was a quite similar story, so then we would tap on the screams. And then we would tap on the memory of what it looked like when they tried to help her up. And then we would tap on the panic. I need to find a phone to call 911. And then we would tap on, I don't know what to do, this guilty feeling, I didn't know what to do, I tried to help her, I did the best I could. And we tell the story from start until the end, until we can get through the whole story without any emotional reaction. Not that we want to be able to not react to it, but we're able to see the experience from a different point of view. So you tell the story from beginning to end, and they'll be able to feel compassion for themselves and for the other person that might be involved in the story, for example. So this is a really good way of approaching it step by step as a story, as they tell the story out loud, or they can just tell it in their mind. If they're not able to speak it without having a reaction, like an emotional, strong reaction, then just have them tell the story in their mind from start to finish and tap on all the issues that come up. Sometimes that's a really good way to approach something as well. Another technique that you might find helpful is called the stepping stone approach. So we'll talk about that a little too. So the stepping stone approach is a bit like gradual desensitization. And if there's any mental health professionals or any other therapists that are watching this, then you'll probably already know a little bit about gradual desensitization. If a client has a very specific phobia or fear or negative emotion about something, then we implement it gradually. We don't just dive into it or force them to face their fear. We allow them at their own comfort level to experience a little bit at a time. So if a client, let's say, has agoraphobia or fear of open spaces, and we are working with them in an indoor environment, we don't just hold them by the hand and bring them outside. We tap until they're comfortable taking baby steps and little steps. And maybe in the first hour session, we can get them to the front door and maybe outside, but we only ever approach it using EFT if the client is comfortable. So the beauty of EFT is that they never really have to experience that extreme discomfort. And if they are, we can probably tap it away within 30 seconds to a minute anyway. And if it comes back and it's strong, then we back off a little bit and we take one little step at a time as we introduce their fear to them a little bit more at a time. So if it was a fear of spiders, first we could show them a picture of a spider, then we could let them be in the same room as a spider, and then eventually allow them to hold the spider. And sometimes that can actually happen in an hour, which is amazing considering what we would normally have to do with gradual desensitization. So it's the same idea, the same style of approach, but using with EFT can speed it up rapidly, which is great. Another technique or approach that you can use with EFT is something called a non-directive approach. Sometimes clients will come to you and they know that there's something there and there's something underlying, a problem or a general emotion that they have, and we're like not even sure where to start with it. And it's okay. As much as I've encouraged you to be specific with emotional freedom technique, it's also okay to take a non-directive approach. An example of that would be, even though I have this anxious feeling and I'm not really sure what it's about, or have your client say this, I can love and accept myself anyway and be open to what that anxious feeling might really be about. Even though I have this anxious feeling, I'm not quite sure what it's about, but I know there's something underneath that. I'm going to love and accept myself anyway and be open to seeing what that anxiety is really about. I'm going to be willing and open to experience that so I can allow myself to heal. This anxious feeling, I'm not really sure what it's about, but I'm going to be open to it. This anxious feeling, not sure what it's about. This anxious feeling, not sure what it's about. This anxious feeling, but I'm going to let myself see what that anxious feeling is really about. Then you would do your gamut point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This anxious feeling, I'm not quite sure what it's about, but I'll be open to seeing what it is. This anxious feeling, I know there's something underneath there, but I'm not quite sure what it is. This anxious feeling, I know there's something underneath there, but I'm not really sure what it's about. But I'm going to be open to seeing what it is. And take a deep breath in. And then I would ask my client or invite myself to sit and observe and to be with the sensation, closing eyes, turning the attention inward, and just notice what comes up. Because in a relaxed state of tapping and EFT, when the body is calm and the mind is relaxed, the subconscious mind will let you know what it really is about. And you'll find, working with clients, that if you let them tell you, instead of you telling your clients where they need to go, because sometimes we're really good at that kind of detective work, sometimes your clients will be like, you know what just popped into my mind was this feeling I had, a couple of weeks ago when this thing happened at work. Perfect. Let's tap on that. And then when you're done tapping on that, even though this anxious feeling might really be about what happened at work with my boss 2 weeks ago, I can love and accept myself anyway and go through your round. And then when you're done, have them take a deep full breath in or take a deep full breath in yourself, and then sit and just wait and watch and observe of the next thought that pops into your mind. And this non-directive approach I really enjoy using with my clients so that they can tell me, and really it's their subconscious mind unfolding, peeling the layers of the onion, which is really what EFT is about, and where we feel and see and experience the most benefits of EFT, as we peel the layers of the onion back one at a time to see what it's really about. And that's the non-directive approach. So the next approach that you can use with your clients is also called a keyword approach. Sometimes we're working with clients, although there's always the aspect, of course, of developing rapport. No matter how close of a rapport that you have with your client, there might be a topic or a memory or an experience they've had that they know they need to heal from, and they know they need to do some EFT on it, but they're really embarrassed or ashamed, usually, to actually say it out loud. And that's okay. You can take one of two approaches. You can either have them tap on this embarrassment and this shame, I don't want to talk about it, but at the same time, it's just as easy to do EFT and guide them through the process by using a keyword and the keyword approach. So, and it can be something completely random. So even though I have this blue sky problem, just pick a random word that maybe associates for them something that happened to them, because when the accident happened or when they were abused, they remember looking outside to see a blue sky. You don't even have to know what it's about. They just have them say, okay, you don't want to tell me what the issue is or what the trauma was. That's okay. Just give me a keyword about the emotion that you felt when it happened. Or give me a story, name the story if you're going to use a story approach combined with this. And what would it be called? Oh, it's the blue sky problem. Okay, let's call it that. And as long as they're focused and as long as they're tuned in, then that's all that matters. And you would tap on this blue sky problem, this blue sky problem, this blue sky problem. And then they could maybe come up with the emotion if they were comfortable with that. If the blue sky problem was really, I was sexually abused, because often we find that clients don't want to share that information because at some level they feel it was usually their fault. So when you can get them to just use a keyword, then you can help them through the process and they never really have to disclose to you. And then they can heal from the process, never having to feel the shame or embarrassment of having to talk about it. And you might find that they actually are okay talking about what's happened after they tap on it. So that's the keyword approach. You can just use any word, a fake word, a makeup word, to name the event and what happened, or to name the specific emotion if they're not willing to talk about it. The next approach is kind of unique, and we're going to call it the memory retrieval approach. Something else that EFT can be used for is, again, to help the mind relax and help the body relax, help the energy system be calm, so that you can access memories that aren't really accessible, or if there's repressed memories sometimes, or sometimes it's just like, I can't find my keys, I forgot where I put them, and see what happens. Even though I forgot my keys, I can't remember where I put them, I can love, accept, and forgive myself anyway. I can't find my keys. What did I do with them? I can't find my keys. Where did I put them? I can't find those keys. What did I do with them? Looking for my keys because I can't find them. Oh, this is frustrating. What did I do with my keys? And then you could do your gamut point if you wanted to. Or you could just tap another round. This remaining I can't find my keys problem. This remaining I lost my keys. What did I do with them? I can't remember where I put my keys. I can't remember where I put my keys. Can't remember where I put my keys. And take a deep full breath in. And as you sit, the idea is to close the eyes, turn the attention inward, and just watch and observe what comes up for you. And chances are pretty good the next thought you have is where you left your keys last. It's beautiful. That's amazing. It can also be helpful if a client has repressed memories about something that's happened traumatically in their life, or if there's the memory that they have is missing some parts or some components to the story. So sometimes they have a partial memory loss about what's happened to them. So you might do EFT, if you're qualified as a therapist, to say something like, even though I don't feel safe remembering everything that happened that day, or even though it's really uncomfortable for me to approach remembering what happened that day. You would have your client say this, of course, as you tap with them or tap for them. And I can love and accept myself anyway, even though I can't remember everything that happened that day. I can love, accept, and forgive myself. I can't remember everything that happened that day, but I can love, accept, and forgive myself. I can't remember everything that happened. It was an awful day, that's all I know. I can't remember everything that happened. It was an awful day. Then take a deep full breath in. You can either add in the gamut point if the memory doesn't come back any clearer. You can practice doing a remainder round if the memory doesn't come back as well. So the memory retrieval technique is also a fabulous way to get to the deeper layers of the onion if we're peeling back layers with our clients to make EFT the most effective that it can be. The next technique that we're going to talk about is going to be called the tearless trauma technique, which is actually made by Gary Craig, the founder of EFT. So the tearless trauma technique is a technique that's designed to minimize emotional pain and distress for the client. It's not to say that there's never any tears involved, but if there is a trauma that the client has experienced, instead of having them go back to the specific memory in their mind or to tell you the story, we use a more gentle approach where we ask them, if you were to think about it, don't actually think about it, but if you were to think about it, what do you think it would be on a scale of 1 to 10? Just if you were to think about it, what would it be? And then have them tap until they get to a 0. So it's kind of like a pre-tapping procedure to make sure that before you even go into the story, they can imagine themselves either watching it and observing what happened from the outside, as if they're separate from the event that happened. So keep themselves separate from the event and have them tap as they're watching the event, or themselves in the event. Just so it's like helping them to reduce the abreaction or the strong, intense emotional reaction that they might have. And that way it's a bit more of a gentle approach. So most clients will say, well, if I was going to think of it, it'd probably be a 10. I know it's a 10. I don't even want to go there. Even though I don't even want to go there because I know it would be a 10, I can love and accept myself anyway. Don't want to go there. I know it would be a 10. It would be a 10. If I had to think about it, it was going to be a 10. Don't want to think about it. Deep full breath in, let it relax, and think about it again. If you had to go through the memory, how intense do you think it would be for you? And you'll find that number with your client slowly decreases. And then you can start to move into tell the story technique, where you slowly move through the story and have them tap on each emotional charge or emotional reaction that comes up. But sometimes keeping themselves separate from it helps them to stay a bit more calm about the whole process. The next concept I would like to address is something called the choices method. Now, this was developed by an EFT therapist by the name of Pat Carrington, who has a PhD and does wonderful work in the field of EFT. Now, the choices method is sort of an extension of the setup phrase. So we'll go back to the setup phrase, which for up until this point has always been, even though I have this problem, I can love and accept myself anyway, fully and completely, which is a perfectly fine, wonderful setup phrase. And the choices method is something that we implement slowly and gradually. Let's say, for example, that we were going to do 10 rounds of tapping on a guilty feeling that a client has. And we were going to use, even though I have this guilty feeling, you would start with, I love and accept myself anyway, fully and completely, and tap on this guilty feeling, the whole process. And then when they get to the point, is it still guilty? Okay, yes, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, still a 7. You would do, even though I still have some of this guilty feeling, I can love and accept myself anyway, fully and completely, remaining guilty feeling, remaining guilty feeling. Take it all the way to the bottom of the procedure and check in with the number again. And when they get really low on the scale, where there's just a little bit of guilty feeling left, for example, it could be any negative emotion where there's only about a 1 or a 2 or a 3, this is where we can implement the choices method. So watch for the change here. You would say, or have your client say, even though I have this guilty feeling, or I still have some of this guilty feeling left, I choose to love and accept myself, and I choose to let that guilty feeling go. I choose to forgive myself, fully and completely. And then you would continue to tap on remaining guilty feeling. I choose to let it go. This remaining guilty feeling, I choose to let it go. This remaining guilty feeling, I choose to let it go. I choose to be at peace instead. I choose to forgive myself for what happened. Now, even the word choose gives the mind, or the subconscious mind, an option. It's not that we're forcing ourselves. It's not that you're forcing your client to accept themselves regardless of that negative emotion that they do have. We'd like them to, but adding the word choose and changing up the setup statement can make a wonderful difference in terms of reinstalling positive. What happens if we just remain neutral? Even though I have this guilty feeling, I love and accept myself anyway, and we don't give the subconscious mind any other direction, then sometimes the feeling just remains kind of blank and neutral, which is fine because it's usually a very serene or blissful feeling. But once the intensity on a scale of 1 to 10 gets below, like a 4 or a 3, it's different for everybody, you'll be able to begin to shift into the opposite or guide and choose to accept a feeling that would be not necessarily directly the opposite of that feeling, but moving in a more positive direction. Some other examples would be, I choose to, I would prefer to, I intend to, I decide to, I embrace. I love the feeling, I allow myself to. I feel excited about, I feel grateful for. I'm going to consider, I'm going to allow. Some other options would be, instead of love and accept myself anyway, could be I forgive myself for feeling. Forgiveness for self and for others is often a really good part to implement into the setup phrase as well. I'm going to trust and know I did the best I could. Okay? I'm going to accept things just the way they are. I'm going to be okay with who and where I am right now. I'm going to choose to feel safe instead. I'm going to choose to feel at peace instead. I choose to feel powerful. I choose to feel inspired. I choose to feel calm and confident. I choose to trust my inner guidance. I choose to release the need to control, is a really good one for most clients too. I choose to let go of the guilt, the shame, the resentment, the fear, the anger, the anxiety, whatever it is. So for an anxious client, you could use an example, even though I have this anxious feeling, if they were less than a 5, generally speaking, even though I have this anxious feeling, I choose to feel relaxed and calm instead. Yeah, this anxious feeling, maybe I can let it go. I can choose to relax instead. This anxious feeling, maybe I can choose to relax instead. This anxious feeling, maybe I can choose to relax instead. This anxious feeling, maybe I can choose to relax instead. You can add in a gamut point procedure if you'd like, and see if that helps. So feel free to use whatever words that you've heard and that landed for you. Feel free to get creative with the setup statement. And remember that that word choose can guide your client from the negative emotion gradually into a more positive emotion. But the implementation of it should never be done in the first round or two, or if the client is really high on that intensity, the SUDS scale, subjective units of discomfort. If the client's like an 8 or a 9, we're going to say, even though I have this anger or this sadness, maybe I can accept myself. Even though I have this anger, maybe I can accept myself. This anger, this anger, this anger. And when it gets to a lower number, it's really important to only add the choices method in when it gets to a lower number on that scale, like a 3 or a 4. The anger's dissipating, there's a little bit left. Even though I still have some of this anger, I can choose to let it go at this point. And maybe I can choose to see the other person's point of view. Maybe I can choose to see the other person's point of view. This remaining anger, maybe I can choose to let it go and see the other person's point of view. This remaining anger, maybe I can choose to let it go and see the other person's point of view. Hopefully those are a couple of examples. If you do a lot of EFT, saying you love and accept yourself fully and completely is great, but it does help to kind of change up the setup statement a little bit to make it a bit more of a variety and a bit more exciting. So the next two concepts that I'd like to cover include something called borrowing benefits, as well as imagining the tapping. So borrowing benefits is a really fascinating concept that kind of developed out of observation. As Gary Craig would host groups after groups after groups, he noticed that other people in the crowd that were tapping along started to benefit from their own issues as well. So if you're a therapist and you plan on hosting other group sessions, here's what you can do. If you have a group of 20 people, it could be 30 people, it could be 50 people, whatever you're comfortable with, have that group imagine something or focus on something that they'd like to work on. It's important to note that not everyone has to be working on the same thing, like a food craving, for example. You can have one person working on a food craving and one person working on anger and one person working on sadness and one person working on anxiety. They can choose whatever they'd like to work on in their own mind. And after they've chosen what they'd like to tap on, have them give it a SUDS rating, subjective units of discomfort, on a scale of 1 to 10, how high is my negative emotion? From this point, you'd have someone come up on stage and identify what their issue is that they'd like to work on. You would work one-on-one with that person on stage, and everyone in the crowd would tap along in order to assist and support that individual who's up on stage. When the individual up on stage has their emotion get to a 0, then you'll have everybody in the crowd check in with their problem. And what most people find, anywhere between 70% and 100% of the crowd actually finds that their number is also a 0. If it's not a 0, it's at least decreased to a lower number on that SUD scale. So from this point, you can have the person on stage return to the crowd and have someone who still has a remaining problem come up on stage with you. Now the whole crowd taps together as you assist the person on stage getting to a 0 with their emotional issue that you're working on. This will continue until everyone in the crowd can get to a 0 with whatever issue that they're working on. And it's also important to note that if you have a larger group, a group of 20 or more, it's suggested that you have another EFT therapist in the room with you just in case someone is confused or has some questions or has a strong reaction to whatever it is that they're working on. They need some individual attention. So it's a really fascinating process. And you'll probably notice as a therapist as well that as you continue to tap with other people, that other issues in your life seem to dissolve if you haven't done your own work already. It is highly recommended that you do a lot of your own tapping before you begin tapping for others as well. So the more that you can be clear, the better that is for your clients. The other technique that I'd like to address is imagining the tapping. Well, they've also found that it's almost just as effective to imagine the tapping as it is to physically do the tapping. Again, the success rate is somewhere around 70 to 80%. So if you or your client is able to imagine tapping and is able to keep their mind focused enough that they can address their problem, give it a number on the SUD scale, and then just imagine tapping in your mind, imagine tapping on all the 14 points. You can skip the gamut point procedure, or you can still perform that with eyes closed, and then go back and check your number on the scale again, and then continue with remaining rounds, imagining the tapping in your mind. And the beauty is that you'll probably find a difference, because the majority of people do actually find that they can help resolve issues just by imagining the tapping. So this sort of speaks to the power of the mind, and it's a great tool or technique to use if you're in a situation where it might not be appropriate to be tapping the top of your head or certain parts of your face. So if you're in a waiting room or there's lots of other people in the room and you feel anxiety come up, you can just go within and tap in your mind. So remember that technique, or to share that technique with your clients so that they can use EFT absolutely anywhere and everywhere. And now for some other variations of the EFT procedure. We're going to talk a little bit about crossing hands over as you're tapping. So tapping the opposite side of your body with the opposite hand. And another part of the gamut point procedure called the floor to ceiling eye roll. So we'll go back first and foremost to the importance of crossing the body. Sometimes what happens if you can cross while you're tapping. So it's not exactly comfortable for all points, but we'll talk a little bit about why it works. So remember we went back to that right hemisphere and left hemisphere of the brain when we're moving the eyes. The same thing actually happens when you're crossing the body. So if you're tapping, for example, under the arm, and you're taking your right hand underneath your left side body and your left hand underneath your right side body, and you were to tap in that direction, it actually helps relax the right and left hemispheres of the brain, because whenever you're crossing over right hand to left side and vice versa, again, it fires right and left hemispheres at the same time to create that whole brain experience so we can let the brain relax and process the emotion. So we'll do a round of tapping, and I'll show you how you can do most of the points crossing the body. So you can start with the sore spot. Actually, you can cross right hand over left, and you can join me if you'd like to. So we'd press in the circle again. Even though I have this problem, I love and accept myself fully and completely. Even though I have this problem, I can love and accept myself fully and completely. Even though I have this problem, I can love and accept myself fully and completely. If you're choosing to do the karate chop point, there's no real way to cross, but instead of doing right hand to left hand or left hand to right hand, you'll often see me as well just tap both karate chop points, which is a nice way to do that. And then you could start your tapping points by crossing at the inner part of the eyebrow and say this problem. And then come to the outside of the eye, this problem. Come under the eye, this problem. And we can't really cross, so we would just do this problem and this problem. But for collarbone, you could cross and say this problem. And for underarms, you could cross and say this problem. If you choose to use the liver point, the top of the ribs, go ahead and do so. You could say this problem, continue to cross the hands. We can't really cross for the thumb or the first finger or the middle finger or the pinky finger, but you could also just come into tapping both karate chop points together. So sometimes if a client is stuck, you can sometimes throw that in. The other option, of course, is just to do right side and left side at the same time to make it just as powerful or more powerful. But when in doubt, try crossing those points collarbone and under the arm, and see if that makes a difference either for you or for your client. Again, if you have someone that's stuck, or you find that you're stuck and you've tried the full protocol, including the gamut point procedure, there's something else that we can add to gamut point procedure as well, and that's called the floor to ceiling eye roll. And I do personally use it a lot with my clients because, again, it helps the brain to relax and helps the part of the brain really process that emotion that we're looking to process. So we'll come back to the gamut point procedure, still focused on the problem, and I'll show you how the floor to ceiling eye roll works. After we look down hard to the right, down hard to the left, make the biggest circle we can find, and then the other direction, and we hum happy birthday, count to 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, happy birthday again. This is where we can incorporate the floor to ceiling eye roll. It doesn't have to be, it's just an option. We take about 6 seconds to have ourselves or the client, as we continue to tap the gamut point, about 6 seconds to move the eyes from the floor to the ceiling. Now it's really important not to move the head as we say this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem. So again, we look from floor to ceiling, looking as down hard as you can and looking up as hard as you can without moving the head. Now that does apply for gamut point procedure in general. You'll notice that we never move the head, we just move the eyes. Really important. It's really awkward at first if you've never done it or your client's never done it, but you'll get used to it, I promise. So that's the importance of crossing over to help the brain relax, and also the floor to ceiling eye roll. Sometimes we incorporate the floor to ceiling eye roll after the 9-point gamut procedure, and sometimes we can just add in the floor to ceiling eye roll after the round of tapping. If you don't like doing the eye roll with your client, or the hum and count and hum, if you want to skip that part and just do floor to ceiling eye roll, you might find that you personally shift or that your client shifts on that SUD scale at that point. So it's really important to be observant as to when the body shifts or when the body lets go of the emotion, because that's usually the meridian line in which the negative emotion is being held. So you'll see your client shift if you're really observant. You'll see them take a deep full breath in. You'll see sometimes people yawn. You can almost just feel the body and sometimes feel the energy in the room begin to change as their number begins to decrease. And that sort of moves into, eventually, as an EFT therapist, you'll be more intuitive about choosing the right words to use with your client and making sure that those words really land for your client. And again, with more practice, you'll be more intuitive about when the number begins to decrease for the client and what point is really good to spend a little bit longer on for them. So tuning into intuition is something, of course, that takes time and takes practice, and that's something that you'll probably find that you'll develop as you begin. A lot of people initially struggle with, how do I choose the right words if I want to expand out of that bracket of, even though I have this problem, I love and accept myself, because there's so many different endings that we can add on to that, and there's so many different ways to expand on the setup phrase. And that's where you'll get probably the most benefits out of watching the one-on-one sessions and the group sessions, because you'll be able to see how you can choose different words in different language and how that applies, and ask your client for feedback. I always say to my client, if this lands for you, if this feels right, let me know. And if it doesn't feel right, give them the space and permission to tell you that, and just say, you know what, if you want to add in a word because it really makes a difference in terms of increasing that SUDS number for them so you can really be effective with EFT, then give them that space and permission to give you feedback to do that. And again, it takes time and it takes practice, and you'll learn by watching all the different one-on-one sessions and having confidence in yourself. You can even tap on that. Even though I'm not sure if I'm going to use the right words, I can love and accept myself anyway, fully, completely, and trust and know that it'll all work out just fine. All right, another option that you can use for the EFT procedure or protocol is actually called touch and breathe. This is where we would just touch and hold the acupressure points instead of tapping on them. It was developed by Dr. John Deephold Jr., who found that some of its clients didn't really enjoy the tapping and how that felt on their physical body, and they just preferred to find an acupuncture point or an acupressure point that was their point, or a point that allowed them to shift the emotion. And they would just touch and hold that, touch that, hold that, press, take a deep full breath in, take a deep full breath out. Again, of course, staying tuned into the problem or the negative emotion. And then you could shift if you like, touch and hold and breathe as you stay focused on the problem. And you could do it in sequential order, or you could just take 3 of the tapping points that you find assist you or your client in shifting the emotions. This is an option as well if you're in a scenario or situation where it's not appropriate, or you feel uncomfortable tapping in front of other people because they might look at you a little strange, at least for now, until EFT and tapping becomes the thing that everybody does, which of course, at least I hope that happens one day. And it's always that option too. So you can maybe just touch and hold your karate chop point and take a deep touch and breathe here as you stay focused on the nervous feeling or the food craving, and nobody else would really know what it is that you're doing. Okay? So feel free to alter points or just choose 1 or 2 points that you like as you touch and breathe, staying tuned into the problem. Hopefully one day everyone will be tapping. I know I personally tap if I'm in a waiting room or if I'm at a red light. And if anybody ever asks me, what are you doing? I just hand them my business card so that we can share EFT with the world.